AV Jug Land, guess what? Lori's running the webinar today. So yes, we had another issue because that is what I'm good at. Welcome to today's session. Let's just do some housekeeping and let me do what we have done for the last, oh goodness knows how long. Share my screen. Here we go, housekeeping, boom. So this is virtual Java user group. I may not be a Java champion, but I pretend that I am. My name is Lori LaRusso, and yes, I am crazy right now because this is, I don't know, every time I run one of these, I always do something wrong, but it's 2021, so that's par for the course, right? If you feel the need to laugh at me more, you can follow me on Twitter at Lori LaRusso. I'm a community manager for JFrog, and I run our Super Frogs program that I'm representing here. If you want to chat with Andres, ask questions, or, you know, just let me know how amazing I am, please use the hashtag live session in our Slack channel. Do not use the YouTube comments. I will maybe turn them off. I don't know how, let's be real. And then for any kind of feedback, you can go ahead and tweet us at virtualjug, or I'm gonna put Oleg under the bus and I have his Twitter handle there right now. So again, I do wanna apologize before I turn things over to Andres. He's one of my dearest friends, and you know, he's willing to deal with me and my craziness. So today's session is releasing at the speed of light. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and turn it over to the man of the hour, Mr. Andres Almiray.
Thank you very much, Lori. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and everybody else that's joining us on this stream today, and perhaps later if you're looking at the recording. So yeah, fun times. It's been, what, couples of months since the last time I was here? No, it was last year, if I'm not mistaken. Talking about Maven, so now we're going to talk about a different tool in this case. But if I figure out how to share my screen, so bear with me in just a moment. I need to move one window out of the way and then click on another button. And hopefully here we go. Yeah. Okay, so JReleaser, releasing at the speed of light. What's going on? Well, so as you know, my name is Andres Almiray. I'm currently employed by Oracle. I'm working at the database group. And yes, it's true. Oracle does produce open source projects and open source code. That's the reason why I decided to join Oracle for the second time, because we do stuff like that. And if that is something that interests you, you certainly reach out to me. I will be very, very happy to talk to you about the things that we do in the open. I'm very, very fond of open source. So the tool that we're going to talk today, the tool that we're going to discuss today is fully open source. So I will give you just a brief idea of how this tool came to be and why it exists, and then we go into the tool proper. I would expect, if you would like to make this a bit more of an interactive session, even though we know it's online, then please post your comments on the Slack channel. And Lori, please feel free to interrupt me at any time whenever we have questions. And we will have time also at the end for any questions that you may have. So the reasons for this particular tool. Well, as I said, I like open source. And I write a lot of open source code. And some of those open source projects that I work on happen to be JavaFX based. As a UI application, as a desktop application, what you want is to reach out your users, your consumers very easily. So building the JavaFX application in its own, it's a straightforward operation. It's not really that complicated. But the problem will be is once you're done, how do you figure out where to find your users? How do you make sure that your users find binaries? So yeah, the picture may look like this, that yeah, you produce code and then what? You post it on a GitHub page, you put it on some cloud storage offering, or do you post it to Maven Central? Not really, right? So you have to pretty soon deal with platform-specific packages, such as Homebrew for macOS and Linux, or Scoop for Windows, or maybe it's Chocolatey, or it's a Snapcraft for Linux. There are actually quite a good number of choices. Another thing that you will be wondering is, well, okay, so I built those binaries. Where do I put them? How do I host them? Where should they go so that my user will find them? How do I keep the information about the application up to date, where it's a changelog, where it's a release notes, or so many other things come to mind. So that's exactly where I was like 2 years ago when I was working on a JavaFX application. And when I was working on that one, I took inspiration from 2 other different projects. One is known as GoReleaser. This is a tool that lives on the Golang space, on the Golang community. And the other one is JBank, for which we have a really great recording from Max Anderson, the creator of JBank, from last year's BJOG session in September, if I'm not mistaken. So GoReleaser allows you to compile code, and just like Go, it can do cross compilation, so you can target as many platforms as you want. But it will also package those binaries so that you can consume them with Homebrew and Scoop and Snapcraft, Chocolatey, and so many others. Upload checksums and signatures and put everything and put it pretty much tied up with a nice bow. And so that your consumers, the only thing that they need to do is, oh, I use Homebrew, but just install that particular tool and you're done. Oh, I use something else, install it directly from that package manager. Turns out that JBank did something similar. So you can install JBank using curl or Homebrew or a Docker image or a Scoop or Chocolatey. So the way that it works, the build for JBank works, is very specific for JBank. And if I wanted to replicate that for my own projects, I would have to do a lot of copy and paste code. So what if we're able to mix both of these projects together, use the model from GoReleaser and the lessons learned from JBank? And that's exactly how JReleaser came out to be. So what is JReleaser? JReleaser is nothing more than a series of file templates that get put together thanks to a model. And you are free to decide what you can put in that model and how you can run that model. So in a way, you continue creating the binaries in the same way as you do it today, whether you use Ant or Maven or Gradle or any other build tool. Supply those binaries as inputs to a model, the JReleaser model. And from the model, you can decide where you want to host the binary. So you can put it on GitHub or GitLab or Gitya. By the way, we also support GitHub Enterprise and custom GitLab instances as well. So it's works for both open source and commercial software. You also have the choice to package those binaries to be consumable by any other package managers, such as SDKMend and JBank, Homebrew, and the others that I mentioned before. And finally, you also have the choice of announcing when the new release has come out. You can post and announce to Twitter or Slack or Zulip or an email, or there are other distribution channels. Okay, so how does this thing work? In GoReleaser, everything is done by just one configuration file and one command. It's called GoReleaser. For JReleaser, it came out pretty apparent very quickly that what we wanted to do is give you the option to either invoke the whole pipeline in just one go, or in different steps separate from one another. In this way, if you already have an existing release pipeline and you would like to enhance some of the steps with JReleaser, you can do so. Or if you want to substitute completely your release pipeline and go fully with JReleaser, you can also do so. So you get to choose. So here we have the full workflow of the tool. If you want to do everything managed by JReleaser, the full Monty, just invoke the orange command, full release. And this one will create a Git release, create packages for all the packages that you have defined. Again, Homebrew, Snapcraft, Scoop, and whatever. And finally, announce the release. If we look these things by the different columns, the blue column are all the steps that are needed in order to create a Git release. So we start by creating a changelog based on the commits. We calculate checksums with a series of algorithms that you can configure. We also sign optionally the artifacts using PGP signatures that you can configure. We upload to different options, such as a regular HTTP server, or it could also be JFrog Artifactory. And finally, we release, which we push a tag and the binaries to the particular Git service that you have chosen. On the other column, the prepare, this one handles the uses file templates to create the basic supporting files created and then required by the package managers, such as the Homebrew formula or cask, or the scope manifest. Then it packages these things. In some cases, for the Docker images, is one thing to say, let's create a Docker file from a template. And the package step, you create the Docker instance, the container. And in the publish phase is where you upload the packages, you upload the formula, or publish the Docker instance to the Docker repository of your choice. And then, of course, the announce step is, talks to different communication channels. I also have a fourth column here called assemble, which is a little bit special given that JReleaser expects the binaries to be produced by your build tool of choice. But if you want to create J-Link Java runtimes for your application, whether it's modular or not, or if you want to create GraalVM native images, if your build tool is not already configured to do so, then JReleaser can do that for you. And that's exactly what happens in the assemble step. Okay, so in terms of integrations, I already mentioned a few, but at the current time, these are all the services and all the integrations that we currently support. So you can push your release to GitHub, GitLab, or GitHub. Codeberg is similar to GitHub in the sense that you can host open source projects and it's based on GitHub. And these four services provide the full gamut of features. And if you want to, you're hosting your project in any other Git services that is not currently listed here, you will, for the time being, use the generic Git. So if you're using Azure or Bitbucket or Amazon or something else, you can still rely on JReleaser, but some of the features will not be available to you. In terms of uploading artifacts, besides posting them to the Git release page, which is something that these Git services already offer for you, we can also upload the binaries to Artifactory. So I'm not talking about jars and POM files. I'm not talking about making a release to Maven Central or to an Artifactory repository in this case. This is not a Maven release. This is a binaries release. We're talking about zip files and DMGs and native executables. The another thing that you can do is publish those binaries to an HTTP server of your choice. As long as it supports a post or a put operation, then you should be good to go. In terms of platform-specific packages, we have a few. Homebrew, again, I mentioned that it works for both OS X and Linux. Chocolati works for Windows. Docker, well, it creates Docker images, so it's Linux. JBank for Java packages, you can also create something called JBank catalogs that will allow you to run jar files or single source files. The scope works for Windows. SDKman works pretty much for every platform. And finally, Snap or Snapcraft works on Linux. And in terms of announcements, well, we have a lot of communication channels. The most typical ones probably Twitter and Slack, and there are a few other choices as well. I will demonstrate those in just a moment. So how do you launch this thing? There are a few ways. If you are on macOS, then use SDKman. That will be my first choice. Most people should be aware already what SDKman is. If you are not, just go to sdkman.io, install it, and be happy. But if you prefer to run JReleaser with other means, you can launch it using JBank. Or you can install the Homebrew tab, the Homebrew formula for JReleaser. Or you can also go to the download page of a particular release and download either two zip files. The first one is universal, so you must have Java 8 already installed in your computer. Or the standalone version, which is a custom Java runtime created with J-Link, which comes in with everything that you need to get started. You don't need a Java runtime because it's already provided by JReleaser. For Linux,
The steps are pretty much the same. Either use SDK man or JBank or download the zip file, for which we have an additional zip file called with the platform called Linux Muscle, because this one targets Linux Alpine. In the case of Windows, same ideas, but you also have the choice to use a scope, which is kind of like Homebrew, but for Windows. If you're running Java 11 or greater, then you can use the single source file called JReleaser.java that is available from that particular URL. And this is a very trivial Java source file that will download a jar file that contains everything. It's an Uber jar for JReleaser. And from that Uber jar, you can run pretty much every command. In order to do this, you require Java 11 as a minimum. Or you can run it from Docker. We published 2 different Docker images. The first one targets Ubuntu, and the second one targets Linux Alpine. And these 2 methods are some of the ones that we use for running JReleaser on CI. You have the choice of running the JReleaser model through a CLI tool that we provide, or using an Apache Maven plugin, or an Ant task, or a Gradle plugin. In terms of continuous delivery, CI/CD, we have guides for 14 different services that you will find in our documentation. Some of these guides, for example, in the case of GitHub Actions, it makes use of GitHub Actions directly. So there is a specific JReleaser GitHub action that you can configure. Or in the case of Travis and GitLab, you will configure instead the Docker image. And for some other CI options, you will download the jar. You can use the Git Releaser Java source file to get that bootstrap. Again, the guides will tell you how to get started with this tool. So what are the inputs that you supply? These are the inputs that you built on your own project. So we have a few options. You create a binary distribution. These binary distributions are usually zip files or tarballs that contain a series of a predefined structure. So there's a bin directory that contains the executables or the launchers. There may be a lib directory where you find the jar files. There may be a license file or any other supporting files as needed. Or you can supply a single jar or Uber jar that may be executable and contains all the dependencies. This is the typical deployment for Spring Boot applications or Spring Boot microservices. You can also supply JLink distributions or a GraalVM native image, so native executables compiled using the Grail native image utility. Or you can also supply native packages, either created using JPackage. It was added to JDK 14 as a preview and added as an official tool in JDK 16. Or you can create these packages by hand if you want to. So now let's turn into a demo, because I think this is enough of theory. And let me show you what you can do. All right. So I have here a trivial Java application. Is Maven-based. And what this application does, I think it prints out the number 42, because obviously. And what this build does is, besides being able to execute the main class and set up the executable jar, it also adds 2 additional plugins. The assembler plugin, which will create a binary distribution, and the assembly plugin that will create the zip file plus any other supporting files. So I go here into the terminal, and I'm going to do a clean. I know that people know that I prefer not to do Maven clean install, but it says in this case I did clean, so that you know that there's nothing weird going on. Excuse me. So there is no target directory. Great. Let's build this thing. And so Maven will happily create a few files here. Now we can say, let's do a thing in the target. We have additional files, the distribution. Here we go. We have this tar.gc file and a zip file. So far, so good. Okay, let's look at the release model. I decided to use the external configuration file, but I could certainly use the JReleaser Maven plugin as well. There is a reason to do this right now in external configuration file, because I will be making use of features that are coming up in the next release. The official release right now is 0.50. The next release, 0.60, will come out in the coming days. So what we see at the beginning is a section that describes metadata about your project. This metadata will be used for the templates where we want to create different packages, such as the long description that gets added to the Homebrew description, or going to the scoop manifest, or anything else, right? So that metadata is good to have. Then we go into the release block, which if I want to use the defaults, I could just delete the whole release block, because JReleaser is smart enough to figure out that my code is hosted on GitHub, because it will read the information from the Git directory. But I'm using additional configuration because I want to link a release to a GitHub discussion. So I have that particular discussion category name that we have to have created already before. This is regular GitHub stuff. I would also like to provide a different format for the changelog. I want to format the contributor names, and I would like to categorize the different commits based on different labels. Now, again, this configuration is optional, but it makes generating the changelog much nicely. We want to sign artifacts using PGP signatures. I will also activate Homebrew for all the files that I'm going to upload. And let's see what else. There I have the paths for the two different binaries, a zip file and a tar file. I could have put in the exact names, but notice that I'm using some sort of variables. This is actually mustache templates. And the names, distribution name and project version, are evaluated based on the metadata of the project and the current distribution. So you notice that in line 51, the name of the distribution is app. So the variable distribution name will be resolved eventually to app, which is what matches the actual file in the file system. And then I have 3 communication channels that will be activated. I will publish an announcement to Microsoft Teams, another to a Discord channel of my choosing, and another to a Zulip discussion room as well. Obviously, there are some secret information that is needed, so like usernames and passwords. You could put that information explicitly on the file, but then, of course, you will be exposing secrets. JReleaser accepts reading information from environment variables, for which I have done so already. And there is another configuration file out there in your local home repository where you can also set those secrets. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to show the actual secrets, but the secrets file is located at my root, at my home user, and it happens to be a TOML file. So this is the place where I have stored all my secrets. There are different formats that are supported. Okay, so let's go back here to GitHub. And let me show you that there are no releases. There's nothing there. I go into my Discord server and there are no announcements. And I go into my Zulip discussion board and there are no announcements posted here. All right, so notice what I'm going to do. Let's check if I have JReleaser first. So I said you can use SDK-man. And one of the advantages of SDK-man is that you can have your own custom installations. So I decided to have my own version of the latest snapshot that I'm going to run, but I could easily have chosen any of these that are officially published. So let's ask JReleaser which version we have. It's indeed version 0.60 snapshot that was built just a few hours ago from my point of view. What else can we ask JReleaser? Let's give up a list of commands that we can run. You might remember these commands. Most of them match the names of the workflow, the slide that I showed you earlier. there are two additional commands in it, which will create a JReleaser file with a given format, YAML, JSON, or TOML, you choose, and template, which will allow you to create template files, for example, for Homebrew or for the announcers or something else. I believe I have everything set up right now. So without any further ado, what I'm going to do is invoke a full release, and let's see what happens. Reads the configuration from that secrets directory. Perfect. It tells me the current project version is 100. That's good. It's not a snapshot. What is the current head of my Git repository? Generates the changelog, calculates the checksums right here for all the input files, then signs the input files because that's the configuration that I want. Of course, you can change this. It says upload skipping because I did not configure HTTP or Artifactory. Both the files are actually uploaded to GitHub. We can see what is the repository right there, and then prepares the distributions for which there's only Homebrew currently set up for this distribution. So prepares, packages, creates another Git repository where the formula or the cask will be published, and then finally makes the announcements. And the text that appears here, you can change. So let's go into GitHub here and do a refresh. And what is that? There's a release. We click on that one, and there's the name, there's the release, there's the tag, this formatted changelog. We have a list of all the inputs. So there's the binary 1, there's binary 2, and the checksums, and the signature files for all these files, because that's what I want. And so there's a formatted changelog. So that's how GitHub will render this nicely. And there's a link to the discussion because I gave it a discussion category name. So you can look here that there is the link to the discussion and says it was created from this release. So you can talk about this particular release whenever you want to. Let's look at the announcements. Here's my Discord channel, and there's the card that tells me what is the release. I can click on that and we'll go directly into the release page that we saw earlier. I go now into my Zulip forum and I have a small announcement. I can click on that one and do the right thing again. And I can show you teams. Now here we have right now at this date, with this hour, the new announcement. And I can also click on that one and we'll go to the same location. So everything works fine. What else happened? Homebrew, right? Let's go into this directory and we see that we just pushed a formula 3 minutes ago. And the formula says, it's this. The URL matches the URL found in the repository in the Git release. And the checksum matches what was published. So if I want to install this application using Homebrew, I have to do two things. I have to register my Homebrew tab like this, and then install the formula. In this case, will be app, or just can do it once like this. And this will work for casks and other stuff that you have here that you have configured. Now, what I just showed works for GitHub, right? But let me say you that exec model can work for GitLab or Gitya. And I can do this on my local development machine. I can do the release just as I did it, or I can set it up on CI using the same model. And that's the advantage of JReleaser, because it shortens the distance within your binaries and your consumers by putting them using the package managers they are used to, but also by allowing you to switch within CI providers if needed be, or giving you the option to create a release locally without having to run it on CI or run everything on CI. It's up to you. Again, you have choices. I'm going to show you some other examples. There's this other project from fellow Java champion Gunnar Morling. called KCCuddle, which is kind of like kubectl, but for Kafka Connect. So it's a CLI for interacting with Kafka Connect. Because of how it's built, it is a Quarkus application that produces native executables. It requires building on a specific platform. That's how Grout works. There's no cross-platform compilation at the moment. So what we have to do is set up a build pipeline for Windows, OS X, and Linux, and then collect those binaries and create a release. So how we did this is just a regular Quarkus application. And if you look into the POM file, again, this is, where is this? There's the Quarkus BOM and some dependencies. And we see some plugins here. The important one will be the Quarkus Maven plugin that performs its job. And at some point, I think there is where's the native? Here is, the native is already there right here. There's MailSafe, Maven assembly. Oh no, it's already provided by Quarkus. I don't know where I was looking at. Okay, so what this thing is just regular Maven. And what will happen, it will create some binaries for you. What we want is this. We want a release that contains platform-specific binaries for Linux, for OS X, and for Windows. How do we do this? The first step is configure Maven so that it produces the binary, so that's done. The second thing is use JReleaser. And again, there is some metadata related to that particular project and the list of artifacts that we want to use. So there's the version for Linux, and there's the artifact for Windows, and then the artifact for OS X. Now we're using a different type of distribution. This is native image. If you do this, then we have access to different templates when we package these things with the platform packages. This particular project doesn't do it, but it's a good thing to say, oh, well, we're producing these native images. And the last bit of the puzzle is the GitHub action itself, because this will run the build in different nodes, whether it's Ubuntu, OS X, or Windows. The output of the build the build job happens to be a native executable packaged in a zip. So we will upload that zip, and then we collect all the results into a single job. It could be any name, but it has to depend on build. It runs on Ubuntu so that we can eventually download all the artifacts and then invoke JReleaser using a couple of secrets and environment variables. And this is what creates the Git release. But what if you have a project that does not create binaries? What if you have a project that the only thing that you want to do is push out a Git release with a changelog? So for that, here we have another project. I think we just published it a few days ago called this organization POM. This is a parent POM for Modetect. So the only artifact is a POM file. But we wanted to create a release out of it because we tag it, and we have a very simple history behind it. You can do that. Or you can do something like this. Here's another binary. This is a Kafka connector connector source that happens to be packaged as a tar file or as a zip file. You click on release, and then we have those two files. There is no fancy changelog because we did not configure that for this project, but you get the same idea. You get a real Git release with a tag and a changelog and the binaries. In case you were wondering, those JReleaser releases itself, yes, since the first release. We click here, and you notice a familiar view here now. So there is this changelog that has been formatted very neatly by GitHub, this regular Markdown. And here's the list of all the different binaries that you have access to. And you might remember earlier that I mentioned the reason why I started with this tool is because I needed or I wanted to publish a JavaFX application. So that JavaFX application happens to be Iconly. The application is the Iconly browser. Oh, that's actually not correct. So let's go into the early access release. And I have access to package-specific binaries created using Gradle, but repackaged using JReleaser. Once I'm ready, once this project gets out of a snapshot, which is right now is marked as an early access, once I publish the final release, then there will be a Homebrew cask that will match this particular artifact. And there will be other distribution package managers for Scoop that may use the XC or the zip file. So it's just a matter of enhancing the JReleaser model for this particular project. All right, I think we can, don't know if there are any questions, but I will go into the slides, if I can navigate there. There you go. So what's in store for the future? Well, I said that version 06 is coming. It will be released in the next couple of days. What could be added in the final releases for JReleaser at some point? Well, we could support the Bitbucket or Azure or AWS or some other Git service. The advantage of doing that is that we could have proper releases, so a Git release page, and upload the binaries to the services that this particular Git host support. We could also upload binaries to other places, such as your typical cloud provider storages, Amazon S3 or Azure or OCI or what have you. And just like we support assembling JLink and Graal native images, we could also support assembling with JPackage. The reason being is that we could reuse the metadata that is defined in the JReleaser model itself, instead of putting information duplicate in the build tool or in the external configuration file. So the project is hosted at JReleaser.org. That is the documentation of the project. And the project itself is hosted at JReleaser. If we navigate to the website, the documentation, which we built with Antora, it's quite nice by Antora itself. It contains everything that you need to know, such a quick start for each one of the tools, and tells you what is the different steps in the workflow, what happens on each command, what are the different types of distributions and the characteristics that they need to follow in order to comply with what JReleaser expects. The list of all the different integrations, so we got a slide for that one. And then this blog will tell you exactly how you can configure stuff. So if you want to know how to configure Homebrew, just click here. And this will tell you in the 5 different formats that we support, what you will need to do in order to configure the model. If you don't know what Mustache is, well, here's a primer of what Mustache can do for you. Here are the guides for all the different CI integrations that we have. Again, there are 14 of them. If there's something missing, well, let us know. A list of all the tools that we provide. So you want to know what are the different commands that you have access to before installing the command line. Everything is right there. Or you want to know what are the goals that you can invoke on Maven, or the task in Gradle, or the task in Ant as well. A few examples. This section will be expanded much as time goes by. But if you want to know how JReleaser releases itself and why it does the things that it does, here's the explanation right there. And yeah, so that's basically what the project is. I have a really nice search utility right here provided by Algolia Doc Search, and it will make it very easy for you to find stuff. And this is the latest release version of the document. If you want to know what is coming in the next release, just click on early access. And this one, if I can tell you already that we have a new announcer called article, which will allow you to create blog post entries based on metadata. I can tell that I'm in the early access because the color of the navigation bar changed. because I can also see it right here on early access, or because I clicked it right there. So you should be covered whether you want to use the latest version or the early access releases. All right. If I'm able to go to the slides, here we go. Okay, so just a quick reminder, everything that we saw today is open source, and you feel free to contribute if you want to. If you have not contributed to open source before, it's very, very easy. File a ticket. That's it. You find a missing feature, you find that there's a problem, there's a bug, there's something that is not working properly, file a ticket, and you're done. If you have the time and the passion, sure, provide source code, but at the very least, just file the ticket and let the people on the other side know that something could be improved or is not working properly. And and that goes for JReleaser, what we saw today, or any other open source project or dependency that you consume in your daily work. I think that that's pretty much what I want to, what I have prepared for you in the slides. I could certainly speak for hours about this tool, but I would say that if there are any questions, I guess now will be the time.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And while we wait for some questions to come in, I have a little, I'm so sorry, and I want to thank you for putting up with me, gift. So if you will let me share my screen real quick, that would be amazing.
Yes, I'll do. Where's the stop share button? Right there.
Thank you, sir. So my colleague at JFrog is the best. And I told him I had a little snafu this morning. So what he did was he went ahead and created a chance for you to win a Raspberry Pi 4 desktop kit. All you have to do is scan this. Ooh, just kidding. All you have to do is scan this QR code and then scroll down the page and enter in your information, and you'll be eligible to win. Or you can go to this link, jfrog.co/lots of letters. But I'll keep the slide up for just another minute. And again, I want to apologize for the rough start and thank Andres for his great session. Making things work faster and having it not be harder, I think, is key to everybody's productivity and making life easier. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and see if any additional questions have come in. So far, it looks like no. So if you have any parting things to say, where are you going to be next? You are a super frog. I'm happy to have you in my program. Little plug. And I liked all the stuff that you said about Oracle actually supporting open source, since, you know, I'm also a former Oracle, but that's okay. So is there anything you would like to tell our peeps?
Right. So the tool continues to evolve. There are a few features that we have in mind that we would like to add, again, based on what I pitch on what could happen in the future. But if you test out the tool and you find that something could be added, please let us know. Start a topic, create a ticket, and let's take it from there. I really want to emphasize that the tool is very flexible. You can delegate your full release pipeline to JReleaser, or just tell it to do a few things. If you just want to create the Git release and do not publish binaries, that's fine. But if you create a Git release by other means and the tag was already created, well, yeah, JReleaser, it's fine. It can just simply upload the binaries for you. So it's up to you. It's up to you how to use the tool, how much you want to get to know the different commands, or how little you just want to say, JReleaser, take care of everything, go in autopilot mode, and that will be it, I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This was, I think, your 6th VJug session, and we look forward to having more. If you guys have any additional ideas of topics you'd like Andres or someone else to present, please hit us up in the Slack channel. You can hit me up, Lori LaRusso, on Twitter, in Slack. Use the live session, use general tab, whatever you want. We are here to try and make that accessible to you. Thank you all so much for your time. I'm going to end the stream. Again, I apologize. I think it's just, I have a curse and one day I hope for it to be lifted. But until that happens, y'all have a great day and I look forward to hosting again. So bye guys.
Bye.